start that, and let's get going. So, been a little bit. Let's recap. What was big picture what happened last time?
Tusculum becomes a city-state.
So that's what we ended with, but it was largely Rome reasserting itself. So I think the time before that, we did the fall of Rome, and it getting sacked by the Gauls. And then last time we met, it was largely just Rome back campaigning like crazy over and over again, everyone suddenly rebelling against them. In particular, Antium is the one that's been a big thorn in their side. So Antium, they also took Satricum, and now the Volsci have a place to attack the Romans from. So Romans have been fighting Volsci for hundreds of years now. The Antium being back in Volsci control, rebelling against the Rome, that's where a bunch of their fighting has been going on. With the Hernici, they rebelled against Romans and have been kind of supplying troops, but they've yet to actually fight. The Latins have also largely rebelled against Rome, and they've been somewhat fighting. But it's largely been the Volsci that have been attacking Rome, in particular because Antium is now back in Volsci control. It was when Camillus, not as a dictator, but as a military tribune, I think his 6th election, it's when he was down fighting down here near Satricum against Latins and Volsci, that he realized that there were some of their prisoners were from Tusculum. And then that's when he suddenly booked it back up to Rome to report that. They marched on Tusculum, and Tusculum pretty much just instantly surrendered. Didn't even put up a fight. And then because of the way Tusculum just surrendered themselves and basically said, sorry, please forgive us, Rome said, okay, and did something huge. They made Tusculum part of Rome. So the citizens of Tusculum are now Roman citizens. They can participate in Roman elections. They now have Roman rights. So huge political innovation that Rome just applied right there, actually expanding itself that way. It's not Rome conquered a city and now controls that city the way most empires expand. It's actually Rome now exists in 2 places. And so it's technically part of Rome now with Roman citizens, not Roman subjects. So citizenship expanding to different cities. Now, of course, Rome has taken in citizens before, but that always meant them migrating to Rome. Now, Tusculum, Roman citizens. So that was the big political innovation that Rome came up with last time that is going to help them expand and grow the way that we know they ultimately are. So that was kind of a quick recap from last time. Anything in particular you have questions about before we go forward?
What's happening in Beira, the city?
It's still in Roman possession, still Roman control, still subject to Rome, like other cities are subject to Rome. So there are occupants there are people living there. Roman citizens were not allowed to live there. They were the ones who were forced to come back to Rome. So it's now just like any other city that Rome has control over with its people doing whatever they're doing. Rome has control there. So now it's nothing special. The only reason we made special mention of it before is because Roman citizens tried living in B as Roman citizens. And that was the big no, you have to come back or we're going to kill you.
Well, also it's special because it's so good for trade, right?
It's
so good for trade.
It's good for trade. It's amazing for defense. And it's a good place to control the other cities around V, which control the trade. Not sure how far back we have to go to get that trade route. So with V, down here, it's a good place to control other cities further out. So here's one that's under their control that they now control because they control V, which is along this major trading road. So good for trade in itself, but really an amazing stronghold on the other side of the Tibur River. Okay, any other questions? We did that. We run this one. Any other questions? Okay, so jumping forward. Internally in Rome, what's the big problem that the plebs have right now? Debt. The plebs are all being way burdened by debt. The reason that they all have such an extravagant amount of debt is because Rome was sacked. And so basically all the funds went into rebuilding Rome. A bunch of people had to take out loans to finish whatever they were working on, and so they've just been accumulating debt over and over again. So debt is continuing to get more and more out of control in Rome, plebs more and more complaining about the amount of debt they have. And remember, legally, what's the biggest interest rate you can charge right now? 100%. And so if that's the legal cap, you can bet some people are charging it. And we already talked a little bit about how absurd 100% interest rate is, and how quickly that just swallows you up, you're dead. No way to get out from underneath that. And so the debt is getting out of control. The problem they have is the tribunes of the plebs. They're exaggerating that the debt is way worse than it actually is and saying half the state has been enslaved. The patricians are the ones constantly understating how bad the debt is. No one really knows exactly how bad the debt is because you need someone to go and accumulate everyone's wealth, calculate everyone's wealth to see how much money they have. So what they really need are the censors elected to conduct a census. And remember that those typically come around once every 5 years. So finally a census year comes along. The plebs, very happy about that. They want the census to be done so people can see just how bad the debt is. Now it just so happens when the censors are elected, shortly after one of them dies in office. And so they have to elect different censors. So then they elect different censors. Some priests decide, most likely with patrician influence, that there was a problem with the auspices when that election occurred. There was a bad omen, bad sign. That election doesn't count. And because of some other religious reason, you can't do a third election. So they block the census being done because they don't want people to know how bad the debt is, so that they can continue to understate it. So census does not get carried out, and no one really knows how bad the debt situation really is. Oh yeah, and the patricians block new elections of censors. So census doesn't get done. Huge problem for the plebs. Now, the other thing that the patricians need to keep control is to keep the plebs outside the city. If the plebs are outside the city, then there can't be any voting done to pass any new laws. Because remember, a tribune of the plebs can now just offer up legislation and have the plebs vote on it. So they can start putting forward legislation to do something about the debt. So now the patricians are pushing for preemptive strikes against all Rome's enemies, saying they're about to attack us, they're about to attack us, they're about to attack us. We need to levy the troops, and we need to send them out to go fight. And this is just keep the plebs busy outside the city, so that they can't politically take any action. So that's what the patricians are now pushing for and being somewhat successful, keeping the army outside the city to keep the plebs busy. Now, the debt problem still keeps growing the way the debt problem's been growing. And it gets to the point that we start to have plebs being handed over to their creditors as essentially slaves. Basically, you're being forced to work for the person until you pay off your debt to them. But when you're being forced to do labor for them, you can't really go earn money on the side to pay off your debt for them. And so it's essentially putting them into plebs, or putting them in as slaves. So tribunes, out of options now. The tribunes, meaning the tribune of the plebs, they're out of options now. All they can start doing is blocking the levies to keep the plebs right there and start using that as a leverage point to try and get some sort of debt reform passed through the Senate. So they start blocking levies, and they start blocking debt charges and debt trials as much as they can. Remember, what's the one thing a tribune can do? Tribune of the plebs, what's the one power they have? Veto. Right, so they can veto, but they can veto an action. So when someone goes to try and levy the troops, they can veto that. And when someone is bringing charges against some poor pleb saying that you haven't paid me what you owe me on the loan, you're behind on your payment, so now you're going to come be my slave essentially, they can go and they can veto and block those particular actions. But they have to be there to block the action. There's only 10 of them, they can't be everywhere. So they're doing everything that they can to block these charges, these trials from coming against the plebs over debt collection. And they're blocking the levying of the troops. That's an easier one for them to do because that's a very public action. So they're doing the best they can, but still some plebs are being brought to trial and having their lives ruined over all the debt. Now, Rome's enemies always know what's going on internally inside of Rome to some extent. And so Praeneste, a nearby city that they've been fighting kind of off and on here for a little bit now, with the support of some Latins, they begin a war effort against the Romans, knowing that the tribune of the plebs are blocking the levy. So Rome can't send out an army against us, so we can go raiding the territory and get some wealth for free. The tribunes, they're happy about this. So the tribune of the plebs, they're saying now we have some leverage against the patricians. So they're going to continue blocking the levy in exchange, hopefully, for getting some sort of debt reform from the patricians. And they continue blocking the levy. Praeneste and the Latins that they have become more and more bold, raiding Roman territory, clear up until they're right outside the actual city walls of Rome. And it's only when they're actually outside the city walls of Rome that the patricians are forced to do the only thing that they can do, which is appoint a dictator. Because now a dictator can levy the troops, because you can't veto a dictator. So the Senate, they hate when they have to do this, but when push comes to shove, if it's going to have all of Rome destroyed, they're going to have to do it. So the Senate is forced to appoint Titus Quintus Cincinnatus dictator, named after his great-grandfather, whoever. I don't know how many generations back Cincinnatus would be, but this will be his descendant. The Cincinnatus. Anyways, so now, around Rome, dictator gets appointed. Again, Praeneste and their fellow Latins, they know what's going on inside the city of Rome. They hear that a dictator was appointed. They think, okay, it's no longer free. They're going to run it away and run away somewhere safe. So hearing a dictator was appointed, they go and they run to the Allia River, and that's where they set up camp. Do I have a map nearby? Can't believe I didn't put a map for the Allia River. This barely shows it. The Allia, let's see. It's not going to have it labeled. The Allia River was the river where the Romans fought the Gauls. That was called the Battle of the Allia. Can't believe I don't have a picture of it. Oh my God, sorry. Okay. So they run to the Allia, which is, you got your Tibur River, right here the Anio comes across, Videne is somewhere up right here, and then the Allia is somewhere up here. So that's how far up north they are, Rome being somewhere like right here. So the Praeneste and their Latin allies, they go and they set up camp right over by the Anio River, not the Anio, the Allia River, because that's where Rome suffered their biggest defeat. And so the Praeneste generals are saying, when the Romans come and they fight us here, they're going to remember what happened last time they were here. They're going to be terrified to even fight us. We're going to do one solid push. They're going to give way, and it's going to be a great day, easy victory. That's what Praeneste is telling their people. The Romans are very eager for this fight. They are happy that these guys camped here. To the Roman mind, they're saying, this is where we suffered a great humiliation. And they are giving us an opportunity to now go and redeem ourselves. And so the Romans are actually very happy that this is where they set camp, and the Romans are very eager for the fight. And so when they go and they line up their two armies and the Romans go and fight them, it's nothing like what the Praeneste general was telling his guys it was going to be like. These Romans are fierce, eager, and ready. And so it's actually Praeneste that quickly gives up. Now, since they were on the north side, they don't want to run back to their camp because then they'll be cut off. Their city's core down here. So they just book it from the battlefield, don't even worry about their camp. They're running back to their cities. Praeneste and its surrounding cities that has control over. Has control over like 8 surrounding small towns. And so, to show you where Praeneste is back on the map, here's Praeneste. So the Anio is right there, and then the Allia would be clear here. So they're booking it, I don't know how many miles, running all the way back to their city to try and get some safety. The Romans, rather than just instantly pursuing them, they decide, let's just first plunder their camp. Remember, you plunder their camp, that pretty much stops them for that campaigning season. So first they're going to take the camp, and then they're going to start pursuing the army, going back to where they were. What the army initially did was they set up their camp somewhere right outside Praeneste, somewhere like right here. Set up a nice fortified camp to get ready for when the Romans came, to try and stop the Romans from plundering them and their surrounding little 8 towns that they control. But since the Romans kind of dragged their feet coming down, by the time the Romans come along, they kind of even psych themselves out of that and abandon the fortification that they hurried up and built up and spread out to Praeneste and their different 8 towns, trying to keep everything defended. So, starting to psych themselves out, with Rome dragging their feet a little bit, coming down to get them, because they just load themselves up with plunder. So when the Romans show up there, they see the empty fortification. They say, okay, we'll loot that for whatever it has. And then they show up to Praeneste. Praeneste, nicely fortified, that's the big city. They don't want to besiege that city, but they know Praeneste has control over all these surrounding towns. So they just go from town to town, completely overwhelming it, don't have to bother besieging. Just overload the city. They can't stop the entire Roman army, running up with ladders, doing whatever, to just take the cities by storm. And just town by town by town, they're taken away from Praeneste. Praeneste, panicking more and more every time that happens, they're losing more and more control. Some of their soldiers were in each of those towns, they're all being taken. And so once they finally take control over everything around Praeneste, then they finally go and besiege Praeneste. Praeneste, they're not going to sit here and wait for the siege to see what happens. They just flat out surrender to the Romans. They're done. So that's their war with Praeneste. Back at Rome, obviously they're going to celebrate their big triumph for their big victory. They take a statue of Jupiter that Praeneste had. They apparently had some famous statue of Jupiter there that people in the region admired, and they decided that would look nice at Rome. And so they brought it back to Rome, and they engraved a bronze tablet underneath it with Cincinnatus' name, recognizing the fact that he took 9 towns in 20 days. So he was dictator for 20 days. All that happened in 20 days. He took his 9 towns, went back to Rome. Rome's back on top. Following year, unusually, we have 3 patricians and 3 plebs elected military tribunes. Most years, it's all just patrician military tribunes. This time, 3 plebs actually made it through. And so, it's a nicely balanced year. Remember that they're going to be largely your magistrates are controlling who's bringing trials in the city. And so this actually brings a lot of stability to Rome at the time. And so there's not going to be a bunch of trials being brought against the plebs. It's going to give the tribune of the plebs a chance to relax. They don't have to go around vetoing everything. In that same year, there was a quick battle with the Volsci. What ended up happening is the Volsci got some of their Latin allies to report up to the Romans that some Romans were in trouble down south in Volsci territory, and the Volsci had them surrounded. And so the Romans needed to rush down there to save their army, or to save some of their men. And so the trap worked. Roman army rushed down there. The Volsci army ambushed them, caused them some casualties. The Romans had to run all the way back to Rome, lost their camp. And then the Volsci, just beating the Roman army, don't really do anything. They kind of just finish raiding around the territory that they were raiding and go home. And can't remember the exact verbiage Livy used, but something to the effect of they didn't know how to capitalize on victory. They didn't know how to push their advantage and do anything with it. So one of the times that they happen to beat the Romans in the field, drive the Romans back up, they don't really do anything with it. They just collect their plunder, go on their merry way.
They didn't know they'd make it that far.
They didn't plan to make it that far, I don't know. But one of the times that they tricked the Romans. So once again, following year, Volsci, they're going to attack again. They just won the last year. Next year, going to attack again. Get more plunder. We can beat these Romans. Since we're obviously going to have to send the military out to deal with the Volsci, once again, the patricians say, there's no point electing censors to do a census, because everyone's going to be gone anyways. And so the patricians block censors, once again, being appointed. So the census isn't going to be done, so no one can say for sure how bad the debt problem really is. Tribunes say, okay, then we're going to block the levy. And now they're kind of in a stalemate. What the tribunes end up saying is, we will let the levy go forward if you'll agree to 2 things. 1, no tribute can be charged. Basically, you can't charge us any taxes to the plebs while the war is going on. And no debtor can be sued while the war is going on. So you basically can't use taking the plebs outside the city as a way to keep abusing the system and collecting payments. So while the plebs are gone out fighting, none of the debt issue can't get any worse. No one's debt can increase in this time. That's what they're out to do. The Senate and the patricians agreed to that, and so they're able to levy the armies. So 2 armies are levied. One again for Antium, always a thorn on their side, leading the Volsci and the coastal towns. And then another one to go in the inner Volsci territory. So we're going to have one army coming down to Antium and attacking the coastal area, and then another army going in the central area towards the mountain range. Their job, try and draw the Volsci army out in both these areas, see if we can get a decisive victory against the Volsci and put an end to the Volsci being a threat for a few years. That's the big strategy here. So they go out and they go into both these territories, and the Volsci refuse to give fight. They just hide in their cities. And so the Romans do something that they don't usually do. They don't just plunder the territory, they destroy the territory. They go scorched earth. We're not looting people's homes, we're burning everyone's homes to the ground. We're not taking the fruit out of the orchard, we're burning the orchard to the ground. We are going to do as much devastation to the Volsci territory as we possibly can, largely for revenge for the fact that the Volsci tricked them into suffering such a humiliating defeat the previous year. So they're mad that the Volsci won't fight them, they're mad about what happened the previous year, and so they go scorched earth rather than just plundering, causing huge economic devastation in the Volsci territory, in particular around the city of Antium. Antium at this point has been at war with Rome for, I don't know, about 10 years, and they've kind of taken a beating the whole time. So upon the end of the war, so now the agreement's over that the patricians had with the tribunes, creditors go right back to renewing their suits and taxes go back to being charged and collected. In particular, one of the big things that they're currently being taxed for is a new wall around Rome, or at least a bunch of improvements to whatever the existing wall was. This is when a lot of historians think that what we call the Servian Wall was actually built. So, massive wall effort. That's where a ton of money is currently going at the time. And so, they're being forced to pay those taxes. What do you do if you don't have the money to pay the taxes? You have to borrow the money to pay the taxes. And so, that's also contributing to the debt problem. Tribunes now are pretty much out of leverage because there's no army out there. There's no levy that they can block. And so the debt problem is getting worse and worse, and the plebs now, rather than being angry about their situation, are becoming more and more subdued and just coming to terms with the fact that my life is now just miserable. And so they're putting up less and less of a fight. Patricians are getting more and more in control. That's the way the power pendulum is swinging. And so the following year, it's all military tribunes, once again, are patricians. And this isn't just because it was another year where all military tribunes happen to be patricians. Levy mentions that a bunch of plebs largely stopped running for the office altogether. Because it's a financial hit to someone to run for some office, for some political office. That's going to cost them some money in terms of what they'd have to pay to accomplish whatever they do to advertise themselves. But on top of that, if that's what they're putting their efforts into, then they're not putting their efforts into their own job, farm, whatever else they'd be doing it. And so it's financially expensive for them to run for these offices. They're getting to the point where they're so poor now, hardly any of them can even afford to run for the office. And so patricians are just easily winning all the elections now. Now, fast forward a couple years. Once again, Latins and Volsci going to unite against their common enemy, the Romans. And they're going to do it near Satricum. So, over here, close to Antium, Satricum, where they're going to do it, going to be camped somewhere right outside the city, getting ready to fight again. That's usually the point where they raid into Roman territory from. Good gathering point for them all. And largely, Antium is the one that leads the war effort when they all gather here. They're kind of the big boy on the block in that area. Now, once again, 3 armies now levied by the Romans, and almost no resistance. The plebs have just come to terms with their lot in life. They're not even fighting the levy anymore. It's getting to the point where even a bunch of the tribunes of the plebs that are getting elected, even though they're plebs, they're patrician sympathizers. It's largely patricians backing their elections to make sure that they're the guy that gets elected. And so, even the levying of the armies now is being done with almost no resistance. They're getting the troops levied. They split the army up into 3 pieces. They're going to have one piece is going to stay and actually protect Rome itself. That's going to be your worst troops. They're the ones who, when push comes to shove, they're your last line of defense. They made a second army, which is going to be at Rome, but in case anyone comes to attack Rome, that army goes out and deals with whoever's coming to attack the Roman territory. And then finally, their third and biggest army, that's the one that's actually going to march to Satricum and attack the Volsci and the Latins. So that's the way that they design these 3 armies. Largest one goes to Satricum. They show up there, and they fight. Pretty straightforward battle. Nothing fancy happens. So they're outside the city of Satricum, and the armies line up, however they line up. Roman army, Latins plus Volsci fighting the Romans. Now, the Latins here are the Latins who, a bunch of the Latins here are Latins who had been fighting with the Romans clear back when Romans controlled the Latin League. And so Levy talks about how a bunch of them were actually veteran Latin soldiers who became veteran soldiers fighting for the Roman army. And so they fought amazingly well and would not give their ground. And so at first day, it was just a completely hard-fought battle all day, didn't stop, until it finally started raining late into the day, and that forced the armies to stop and separate. Next day, same exact thing. They go, they line up, they fight, and finally, after just tons of fighting, the Volsci and the Latins give up, and they go back to Satricum. They don't bother with their camp. I think they go all the way to Satricum. Romans finally break through center line, enemy flees to Satricum, and in their flight, the Romans were able to finally pursue them with the cavalry and finally inflict some heavy casualties. So the Romans took a decent amount of casualties here. The enemy would have taken more casualties. But the Romans lost a lot of men here. Typically, you don't lose a lot of men in the fighting. You usually lose them when you run away from the fight. But if the fight goes on for 2 days straight, then you lose a lot of men in the fight. Fights don't usually last that long. And so since they run just to Satricum itself, then they left behind their camp, and so now the Romans can at least take the camp, which would stop the Volsci and the Latins in that campaigning season. The Romans wouldn't have to worry about them attacking again. Now, the Romans, they want to deal with these guys while they got them. So they go and they besiege Satricum, since that's where the Latins and the Volsci armies are located, inside the city. So they leave their camp, they run into Satricum. Romans now going to besiege Satricum. The Volsci and the Latins in Satricum, they decide trying to hang on to Satricum is a bad idea. It's not a very well-defended city. In the night, they sneak out back to Antium. Antium, very well-defended city, much easier to fortify, much easier to hold out against a siege. So, in the night, they sneak to Antium. When they sneak into Antium, and the Romans realize that they sneak into Antium, they decide this is not worth besieging. This will take forever. There's no way that we're going to starve them out this way. And they're too fortified to try and take the city by storm. So the Romans, they got the camp. They decide it's time to just leave. It's an end to their campaigning season. We won't have to worry about it again until next year. Now, Antium, after this, before the Romans leave, they do one final raid on the territory, do all the damage that they can. But of course, the territory has just been obliterated in the previous year. And so, when the Romans leave, and they go back, now they're back at Rome, the Antiums decide they're kind of done fighting Rome. This has just been too much. They've had a full generation at this time grow up in Antium completely under fighting the Romans. And so they tell Antium, they tell the Latins, because remember it's Antium with some Volsci, and the Latins together in the city of Antium. They tell their Latins, we want to end this alliance against the Romans. So we're no longer going to be allied with you fighting against the Romans. The Latins, they're not happy about that, but they say, well, okay, that's your choice. And so they leave the city of Antium. Antium goes far further than just deciding they're done fighting the Romans. They actually surrender to the Romans. And when the Latins realize that that's what Antium's doing, not only are they withdrawing from fighting, they're actually surrendering to the Romans. Now the Latins are furious. It's almost like you're switching sides on us. And so what the Latins do is they march to Satricum, the city that just saved them from their last defeat. Satricum, none the wiser, they let the army in, probably there to resupply or something, and they burn the whole city to the ground. Completely destroy the city. Nothing left. That's how furious they are. Now, when the Romans hear about that, they're really furious because technically that happened under Roman watch. Once Antium surrendered to Rome, Satricum surrendered to Rome, technically. And so now Rome was responsible for their defense. And so that just happened under the Roman watch when they find out about it. But word spreads about as fast as people move. And the second the Latins are done there, they instantly march to Tusculum. And they show up to Tusculum. And Tusculum was completely unsuspecting of this. And so when they showed up at Tusculum, Tusculum didn't even have their gates closed. Their gates were still open. So the Latins were able to move pretty quickly. Remember, you're going to have a bunch of veteran soldiers in this Latin army. So I don't know how much that helps them plan these things, but they get to Tusculum really quick before Tusculum can even close their gates, realize what's going on. Fortunately for Tusculum, they were able to realize quick enough to at least hold on to their citadel inside the center of the city. So the Latins weren't able to just take the city as quickly as they were able to just take Satricum. So, obviously, once the Romans get word, I guess can keep looking at this. Obviously, once the Romans get word what's happening, they hurry up and get their army and they march to Tusculum as fast as they can because now Tusculum is basically part of them. Yeah. They're able to show up before the Latins were able to take the citadel and surround the city. And now the Latins were sandwiched between Tusculum and their citadel. So, whatever it's going to look like, you're going to have the city, here's the city walls. Inside the center of the city somewhere, you're going to have the citadel. So you have the Tusculum inside their citadel, the Romans outside the citadel, and then in the city sandwiched between, we got the Latins. And so somehow, the Tusculans and the Romans were able to orchestrate both attacking at the same point. So Tusculum trying to attack over the walls here at the same time Romans are, and just overwhelm the Latins in one point. And once they got control of one point and control of one gate, able to let the Roman army in, and then it's just game over for the Latins. The Romans made sure that they had the whole area surrounded so that no Latins were going to escape. These Latins had caused them a lot of grief. They made sure all of them died. So all the Latins were killed. But they took a lot of revenge before they were. Okay. So there's the end of our war with Antium. Antium officially surrendering to Rome. Any questions on the war stuff before we get to internal stuff? They were going to once they took the city. Yeah, you don't try, like, rookie mistake. A bunch of the armies, when they take a city, they go to looting and plundering before they secure the city. And there's been a few times that the Romans have capitalized on that situation. These veteran soldiers, they're not going to fall for that. Quickly take the city as fast as you can, secure the city, and then you can do what you want. So now, Latins, their army killed to the man. Volsci, they've had their territory just destroyed with some Volsci armies killed. And the biggest Volsci supporter being Antium, now just surrendered to Rome. And so Rome has pretty much pacified the region for a little while. And so once again, when you got peace abroad, that's usually when you get conflict at home. And so we're going to see the conflict at home now. And the conflict back at home is what it's been the whole time, just getting more and more out of hand. Many more plebs essentially becoming slaves. They're not actually slaves, but essentially becoming slaves. Due to debt, the way Livy puts it is he says, punishment had taken the place of payment. They can't pay their debts anymore, and so they're being physically beaten, whipped, whatever it is, and then forced into labor. And that's what's happening to them. And so, plebs, poor plebs, they're at the point where they can hardly even afford to run for being tribune of the plebs anymore. So most of the tribune of the plebs being appointed at this time are all patrician sympathizers, patrician supporters. And so the patricians just have a complete monopoly now on the government of Rome. So now, how is this situation going to change? Well, it starts with a guy by the name of Marcus Fabius Ambustus. Now, the same way that there's plebs who are patrician sympathizers, there's also patricians who are plebeian sympathizers. This guy is a patrician, and he is a plebeian sympathizer. Unfortunately for the plebs, he's a very wealthy patrician who's also a plebeian sympathizer. So he's trying to help the plebs out and help them get back some control of the government. Well, he's got 2 daughters, and his 2 daughters are going to help him kick this off. Oh, go ahead.
Is he wealthy because he has, like, people in debt for it? Like, he would...
Who knows? He's using the plebs to save the plebs. We don't have that much detail in him, but... with the laws that he's going to push forward, I doubt it, but who knows. Anyways, he's got 2 daughters, and one of his daughters, he marries off, the elder of his daughters, he marries off to some well-to-do patrician. The younger daughter, he marries off to a plebeian, Gaius Licinius Stolo. That's the pleb that the younger daughter marries. Now, the 2 sisters, they occasionally get together for meals, whatever they get together for. And one of the times they're at the older sister's house, so she's visiting her patrician sister's house. And because her patrician sister is married to a husband who's high up in the government, a lictor shows up at her house, delivering a message or whatever, a common occurrence. Remember, the lictors are like the tribune, the military tribune's right-hand man. They're enforcers, the ones who carry out their will. And the way that they would knock on the doors, they'd pound on it with their fasces. That's how they do it. And when that happened, the younger sister, she gets shocked, surprised. Well, this guy's at the door. She's scared by the sound that he made, and she's intimidated by the fact that it's a lictor. The older sister makes fun of her, saying, oh, this is the way things are done when you're a high-up patrician. You know, lictors come and go, and this is just a normal occurrence. It makes her little younger sister feel very foolish about this, and embarrasses her younger sister. So her younger sister, she goes to Papa to complain. She says, you married her to this great patrician, and look at what you stuck me with, this pleb. I'm never going to experience all the great things in life that she's going to experience. And her father explains to her that, I didn't just marry you to him for no reason. I married you to him because I plan to help him achieve that same level of success that this guy has. And so I'm going to help your house get all those honors. So stop being so envious of your sister. And so with that commitment, he gets to work. So Ambustus, the patrician, he is now working with Licinius, his son-in-law, a pleb, and then another pleb who's just a well-known pleb, Lucius-Sextian, and he decides that he's going to help them become tribunes of the plebs. So he's going to be the one backing the funding so that they can go campaigning and can afford it. And so this turns out to be successful, and he's able to get them elected tribunes 376 BC. Now, while he was helping them fund their campaigns and while they're doing their campaignings, they were also talking about what they were actually going to do once they get appointed tribune of the plebs. Because remember, tribunes of the plebs can present legislation. So when the tribune of the plebs, when these two come into office, they've got legislation ready to go. And they're instantly going to push for this legislation. So the legislation they push for, it's called the Lex Licinio-Sextian, or in other words, the law proposed by Licinius and Sextius. That's how these get their names. It's 3 laws all bundled into one package. And here's the 3 pieces of it. The first one is that all the interest that has been paid on these outstanding loans so far should all go against the principal. And I don't know, we all understand the math of how like a loan works. Right? If you get a $400,000 mortgage, by the time you pay off that mortgage in 30 years, you're going to pay closer to $1 million. Because you got to pay towards the interest, and then once you make your payment that goes towards the interest, the remainder goes towards the principal. And so, same concept here. And so what they're saying is, anyone who's already paid back their principal in interest, we should consider that debt repaid. Or at least subtract however much interest they paid against the principal. On top of that, whatever is remaining of the principal, that should be paid in 3 equal payments over the next 3 years. 3 annual payments in the next 3 years, and then we're done with this debt situation. Now, this does not apply to future loans or anything like that. This isn't destroying credit in Rome. This is just saying for the current outstanding debt, we're going to do this one time to kind of reset things and get back to normal. That's what they're trying to do with that. Second one. They want to limit land ownership to 500 acres. I think the way that they're using acres there, I think I came across something that says it's really 300 acres when you convert it to how we use the word now, but a ton of land. So they want to limit land ownership to 500 acres. So you can't legally own more than that. Now remember, their economy is very different from our economy. Our economy today, if most of the land around here is owned, that has no effect on me. I still have my job that I can go work. Most people, when they become wealthy today, they start with some company that didn't exist. They bring that company into existence, and they grow that company. And that's how they create wealth. Well, these guys aren't creating their own farmland. It's a zero-sum game. If you own the farmland, I can't have the farmland. So as people monopolize all the farmland in the area, that's pretty much your only source of living. I don't remember what the percentage is. We checked it out once, but with something like 95% of their economy at this time is agriculture. And so if you don't have the land, that's it. You're done for. Now, I came across this not from Livy, but another person just talking about it. I don't know who the author would have been. But I said the second part of this was also limiting the number of cattle you can have grazing on public lands to 100. So that's another problem you have. You have some livestock. If some guy has some massive herd just come through the area and eat up all the grazing, now your cows are in trouble. So That was potentially the second part of it. That's not what Livy said, but they sourced someone, and I just took their word for it without confirming. Sounds reasonable enough. So those two, helping the financial situation of the plebs, and then the big one, and the one that they're going to get the most pushback on. They want to get rid of the position of military tribunes altogether. No more military tribunes. They want to go back to consuls, just 2 consuls. And they want it to be required that one of those consuls has to be a pleb.
Makes sense.
Well, this is the one that they're going to get the most pushback on. One of the reasons that they're saying this is, why are patricians attacking this position? Well, obviously, there's a reason that they're attacking the position. But notice what's happened. What's the difference between the military tribune and the consulship?
It's
Just
the legislative.
The only difference is that plebs can run for the military tribune. And on top of that, there's that teeny tiny bit of the religious part that a consul has that the military tribune doesn't have. But they're almost identical, and then there can be 6 military tribunes, whereas there can only be 2 consuls. And so, one of the reasons, this is the one that people are pushing the most against, why does one of the plebs have to be a consul? Sorry, I said that backwards. Why does one of the consuls have to be a plebs? And one of the things they're arguing is, we have had military tribunes being elected, I think now it's about 50 years that military tribunes were elected. In 44 of those years, not a single military tribune was a pleb. And so even when we open a position up to plebs, that's not enough. We've got to force one of these positions to be a pleb. And they think that this has to happen, otherwise these 2 will be meaningless. They say with this one, yeah, we'll reset and we'll deal with the debt situation now, but in another 100 years, another debt situation will come up and we'll be back where we started. And yeah, we can make these rules about the land ownership, but if you can make all the plebs broke, then they're not the ones enforcing the laws when they're completely outside the government. And so they think that this is an absolutely essential part for these 2 to even mean anything. One of them has got to be a pleb. So that is the 3 laws that they're going to be pushing forward. So, Licinius and Sextus, they got these laws. Remember, they can present laws to the assembly, so they're going to go to the assembly and try presenting their laws. Now remember, they are 2 tribune of the plebs. There's 10 tribune of the plebs. The other 8 tribune of the plebs are in the patricians' pockets, so to speak. And so these other 8 tribune of the plebs are making their lives miserable. Every time these guys try to just read their laws to the assembly, the other 8 tribunes veto them, blocking from even reading the law. Anytime they decide, let's just try to vote on it anyways, even though they're not sure what they're voting on, we talked to them in private and we told them it's a good idea, please vote on it, they get vetoed. And so left and right, every time they even try doing anything about this, it's the other 8 tribune of the plebs that are vetoing them. So it's the tribune of the plebs position that is killing the plebs right now. Constantly being vetoed. This goes on for 2 or 3 years, can't remember how long. Now these guys just can't get anything done. They keep getting re-elected as tribune of the plebs, but they keep getting blocked anytime they try to accomplish something. And they say, okay, patricians, so you can play at this veto game. We're going to veto everything you try to do. And so from there on out, they veto everything the patricians try to do. In particular, anytime the patricians tried to hold an election. So the patricians tried to hold an election for military tribunes, they veto it. Try to hold an election for quaestors, they veto it. They still allow the elections for aediles to go on because those are plebs. But the other magistrates inside of Rome, they veto it. And for 5 years, this goes on, that Rome has no magistrates outside of aediles and these tribune of the plebs. Because they're just going to keep vetoing it over and over and over again. And this is a huge pain for the Romans, or for the patricians, because what can you do? The Senate can't legally just meet together anytime they want. They have to be called to meet together by a magistrate. And even if the Senate kind of got around that one, the only thing they could really do to get past his veto is appoint a dictator. But a military tribune has to offer someone up for the Senate to approve. The Senate doesn't just pick someone. And there's no military tribune. There's no magistrate. They're kind of stuck. Nothing they can do. Luckily, they've just caused a lot of havoc for their enemies, so 5 years without them having magistrates didn't cause anything too terrible to happen so far. Well, Veltre, You might remember they were one of the ones given him grief before, one of the first Latin cities to rebel against the Romans. They know what's going on in Rome. They see it's going on year after year. After 5 years, they kind of feel like we're squandering an opportunity here. We should probably capitalize on the fact that they don't have any magistrates. And so they use that opportunity to quickly go and attack Tusculum, nearby them. Show it on your map here. Velatre, Tusculum, Rome. So use the opportunity to try and get Tusculum.
Since Tusculum is a Roman city, do they have their own garrison, essentially?
I do not think so. If they do, it's not substantial.
You know, the Roman citizens, they have the right to bear arms.
A Roman citizen does not have the right to bear arms. You have to be levied. You can have a weapon out on your own private land, but not inside the city.
I see.
That's a death penalty offense. Unless you're one of the lictors. Okay, so Velatre, nearby city, they seize the opportunity, decide that it's time to go and attack Tusculum. Now, it's Tusculum. And even the plebeian tribunes aren't going to say no to Tusculum. And we can't just let Tusculum die. They're literally our brothers at this point now. And so they say, okay, we will let military tribunes be elected. And so Rome hurries up, gets together, votes for their military tribunes. Their military tribunes hurry up and levy the troops. The troops hurry up and book it up to Tusculum. And they are able to drive the soldiers out of Tusculum before anything gets out of hand and drive them all the way back to Velatre. I don't think they took the time to set up a camp or anything like that, so no plundering a military camp. I think it was just a quick Velatre trying to hurry up and get them. And now that you've got Velatre at war with Rome, we got to take the army now that we drove them out of Tusculum, and we got to go get Velatre. And so what they're going to do now is they're going to besiege Velatre. And they're not going to do a besiege like they typically do. They're going to do a siege like they besieged V, a year-round siege. And why are the patricians going to do a year-round siege? So that they can have the army year-round. Because the army has to be led by someone with imperium. And so now pick your poison, plebs. Do you want them to be led by military tribunes or a dictator? Because those are your only options. And so in that way, they're going to force the tribune of the plebs to stop blocking the elections. Keep the army besieging Velatre. Maybe they're really trying to take the city, I don't know. The way it's presented is they're using it as an excuse to keep the army in the field, to keep the magistrates in office. Anyways, yeah, so war continues for the next few years here, enabling military tribunes to continue to be elected. And so now we are in the 8th year of these two guys' tribuneship. Being re-elected over and over again. It's now their 8th year. And in their 8th year, as they've been growing in support here a little bit, they've been able to get 3 more tribune of the plebs, actual tribune of the plebs, to help the plebs. And so now it's only a 5-5 split. Only 5 of the tribune of the plebs are in the patricians' pockets. And so that's not a majority, but it's pretty close to a majority. And so what they decide to do is try and enforce the law through regardless. So now they're going to just tell the assembly, we're voting on the laws. And when these 5 tribunes who are in the patrician's pocket veto it, we're going to veto their veto. Now legally, this doesn't work. You need a majority to veto. They're a 50-50 split. And so if one person vetoes an action, you can't veto the veto. You need a majority to veto the veto. So the 5 in the patrician's pocket, they get to veto it, and then you can't veto their veto. But they're going to say that anyways, and they're going to try forcing through with the election anyways. And so completely illegal what they're doing here, but you can see why they're doing it. Now, the patricians can't believe their eyes as they're sitting here vetoing it, and these guys are deciding that they're just going to force through with it anyways. And it's so popular amongst a bunch of the plebs that they kind of have the muscle. The patricians start to panic. The only thing they can do is appoint a dictator. Because you can pretend that 5 can somehow block the veto of 5, but a patrician can't be vetoed. So they have no choice.
Dictator.
A dictator, sorry. A dictator can't be vetoed. So, once again, poor Camillus, late 70s at this point, is appointed dictator. And Camillus goes out there and says, quit the illegal action. They decide they're not going to quit the illegal action, so he tells his lictors to put an end to it by force and drive people away. And that puts an end to it. Kind of a bloody little episode there, not so glamorous. But it puts an end to the voting, and they didn't illegally force the law through. And with that, Camillus resigns his office once again. Now the patricians are terrified, because they think the plebs are just going to do this again and try and force it through again. And so the following year, they just go right ahead and appoint a dictator. First thing, so that you plebs don't even try what you did last time. It's not going to fly. So the following year, Fabius Manlius, he's appointed dictator. Now, remember the last Manlius we saw? Manlius Capitolinus, great friend of the plebs, is the way that he advertised himself. Here's one of his descendants. And his father, grandfather, whoever it was, made a name for himself as a great friend of the plebs. And so what he does is he actually selects a pleb as his master of the horse. You remember what the master of the horse is?
Yeah.
You got the dictator, and that's his right-hand man, second most powerful person in the state, master of the horse. And the Senate, patricians, but in particularly the Senate, they are outraged by this. Here we are doing all this to stop the plebs from forcing through a pleb consul, and you just took a pleb and stuck him in a position that most people would consider much higher than a consul. You're setting a terrible precedent here. This is a terrible idea. What are you doing? Now he justifies it as, well, he's a brother of mine-in-law or something like that. Some relation of the family, and family comes first, right? Goes, like, quite literally, I mean, I don't mean this in a joking way. In Rome, there's your family, your clan, then your state. You don't sacrifice your family for the sake of the state. Family comes first. They would never expect a son to turn on his father for the sake of the state. Not in a billion years. That would be a terrible thing in their eyes. So family comes first. And so that's how he justifies it, and you can't argue with it.
So the patricians made Publius a dictator.
And he turned around and appointed a pleb, who's somehow part of his family, as master of the horse.
Why would they ever choose someone that they weren't even sure was on their side?
They were probably convinced he was on their side.
All right.
I would guess that they were convinced since they made him dictator.
Yeah. I mean, apparently he was a descendant of someone who was sympathetic towards the.
Well,
But the Manlius was also a great patrician. Remember, Capitolinus, he saved the Romans. People don't look badly on the Manlian family. And remember, Manlius' whole family turned against him. That was a huge thing for trying to set himself up as a king. That was never done in Rome before. Even Appius Claudius, as one of the most abusive people you'd seen, the Decemviri one, his family didn't turn against him, not in a million years. And so it took a lot of convincing to get those patricians to not support their family, because he was setting himself up as a king. And that's what convinced the plebs largely, is seeing even his own family. Because again, family comes first. And so if someone is willing to actually turn against their family, this has got to be crazy. Anyways, so once again, I don't know, there's now a dictator in power who largely thinks that, looks like he's kind of on the side of the plebs. So Licinio and Sextian, they go ahead and they decide to try pushing forward with their law again. And when they go to try pushing forward with their law again, to their amazement, they're not vetoed. And so now the people are actually going to be able to vote on this law. Should we pass a law or should we not pass this law? And, to their horror, they fail to get the votes. They're shocked. The plebs are able to vote on the thing, and it doesn't go through. And when they start getting feedback on why this isn't going to go through, the plebs are telling them, we love the first two laws you have here. They're amazing, thank you. But not the third law. The one that requires one of your plebs, or one of your consuls, to be a pleb. They want to just be like, open the office up so plebs can run for the office. They think requiring it to be a pleb is going too far. And so that's largely the pushback that they're getting. And the other side pushback that they're getting is it also almost feels a little sacrilegious to let a pleb be a consul, because there is that religious bit. And even though that religious bit practically doesn't matter when it comes to your political powers, it's still very important in the minds and in the eyes of the Roman people.
Just took a little too big of a chunk.
Right, so they're telling him, split the laws up. Present these two to us, and cut that one out, and we'll pass those two. And then we can argue about the other one later. Now, Licinius and Sextus, they are just destroyed over this. Oh my goodness. At this point, it's cost them, what, is this their 9th year doing this? So 9 years of effort, they have been pushing at this to no avail. So they're addressing the assembly now. It's getting close to election time. And the assembly wants them to run for tribune of the plebs once again for a 10th year to push forward with just 2 of the 3 laws. That's the feeling that they're largely getting here. So they're talking to these guys, and they're pretending that they're not even going to consider running for office anymore. They are so infuriated with these plebs. They explain how they have dedicated now 9 years of their life to trying to do something for you plebs, but you won't get behind us and just let us do it. You won't let us help you. And they explain why the laws need to be a package deal. They say without that 3rd one, the first 2 in time are going to become irrelevant. You think that just opening the you think just opening the consul up to plebs will be enough to get a pleb consul. And yeah, that may happen sometimes. But when there were 6 military tribune spots available, only 6 out of 50 years or whatever it was, did a pleb even get one of those spots. If there's only 2 consulship spots, how long is it going to be in between a pleb ever getting the power? And if the patricians are the ones that always have all the power, how quickly will they be able to make slot, even though we can legally run for the office, practically speaking, we can't run for the office. Like, right now, they can all legally run for tribune of the plebs, for military tribune, for the highest state in the office, but practically speaking, almost none of them can do it. And so, that's what they tried to explain to the people. They had their say. Appius Claudius watches all this happen. Not the same Appius Claudius we know, but the same Appius Claudius we know. This guy proves that the Hindus are right. You just get reincarnated. He gets up now and he responds addressing the masses. And in particular, these 2 tribunes who just gave their speech. First thing he gets up there and does and mocks them for presenting all these laws together as a package. You, tribune of the plebs, pretend to be tribune of the plebs. The plebs tell you exactly what they want. They only want 2 of the 3 laws, and yet you're forcing it to be a package deal, which they don't want. He creates the analogy of you're offering poisoned food to a starving person. You say, hey, you're starving, eat this poisoned food. The food being the first 2 laws and the poison being the 3rd law is the analogy that he's using there. It's like, why won't you just give the plebs the food that they want? These poor starving plebs. Why do you have to inject that poison that they obviously don't want? You're putting them in an impossible situation and then getting after them for putting you in this impossible situation. And then he also mocks him about, oh yes, you really don't want to run for the tribuneship after your 9 years of doing it, even though it's illegal to do it in consecutive years. Yeah, let's pretend that you don't really want power. And then he goes and he attacks the 3rd law. He says these plebs are justified in attacking the 3rd law. First of all, your whole argument when you plebs wanted there to be military tribunes is we should be able to select the best man for the job to have that position. And so opening it up so that anyone can run for the consulship makes way more sense than what you guys are trying to force. Let the best man have the job. That's the way it was back with the kings. You selected the best king for the job. A consulship is less than the king, kind of using their same arguments against him. That should be good enough for the consulship as well. But he says, even then they're justified in being hesitant, even if you did just open it up to them, because it is unpious. And it is against the will of the gods. Because there's that religious part added to the consulship. And so because of that, you plebs are justified in still being hesitant against these laws. You don't want to anger the gods, do you? By holding a position that you shouldn't have. And then he goes further, and he says, in fact, on top of that, the other 2 laws, you're good at rejecting those as well. Because the first law, it destroys credit in the state. And while you may be suffering from the loans you have, how much worse off would you be if you couldn't get a loan to begin with? You would have been instantly jailed because you weren't paying your taxes or whatever you needed the money for. Now, he's misrepresenting the first law. The first law doesn't make so that you can't charge interest ever again. It just basically forgives the interest on outstanding loans. But he portrays it as though it's getting rid of credit in the state, which then, yeah, that would be terrible. But that's not what they're after. And then the second law, the one that gets rid of land ownership, he says you're just robbing people of their property. We should have set a precedent for this. Otherwise, anytime someone has more land than you, get enough people to support it, and you'll vote the land away from them. And so you're disincentivizing people to be productive people who grow their land or accumulate land. So he gives his arguments against all three. And then he takes it one step further. And he says, in fact, Licinius and Sextus, they're really just using the first two laws to bribe you. Notice how their third law says at least one consul has to be a pleb. It doesn't say that they can't both be plebs. And so it allows for two plebs, it doesn't allow for two patricians. And so what they're really trying to do is they're trying to bribe you with the first two laws. So I come next year, you will elect them as the two consuls, and when they have you bribed and they have the power of the state, they're going to set themselves up as kings. And that's what's really going on. Yeah, so after that big speech, he's got the plebs hesitant enough that they're not ready to go forward with the vote on the law. And so he at the very least delayed it. And so it's going to go into another year. And Licinius and Sextus, they did continue to run for election, even though they pretend they wouldn't. And once again, for the 10th time, they are actually elected tribunes of the plebs. Now, they realize of all the things Appius Claudius said to the plebs, the one that actually concerned the plebs the most was the religious part attached to the consulship. These Romans really do not want to anger the gods, and these plebs really don't feel comfortable doing something sacrilegious like that. And so they completely shift gears. And instead, the next year, they instantly push to increase Sacris Faciondis, whatever. This is the religious order that was responsible for keeping the Sibylline books, and the one that's responsible for being experts on surrounding religions. It's that religious order. It initially just had 2 priests in it. They push a law to have this increased to 10, where half of them have to be plebs. So it used to be just 2 patricians. They now put all their effort into getting this law. So we're going to increase it to 10, but half have to be plebs. And if the Senate will give them this, then this year they promise to allow elections of the military tribunes. And so this law goes forward. The patricians are okay with this. The law goes forward. The law gets passed. That's what ends up happening. And that year they don't block any military tribunes being elected. Now this is a huge win for the plebs, because the patricians just allowed a bunch of plebs who technically weren't supposed to hold a religious position to hold a religious position. And a religious position that had a lot more religious significance attached to it than the consulship did.
Another argument.
And so now the sacrilegious argument isn't going to hold as much water with the plebs as it did before. And it becomes more clear to them that the patricians are just using this argument to stop us from getting power. So, huge win for the plebs there. And luckily they let the military tribunes be elected, because those pesky Gauls now, they decide to come and invade the Roman territory.
I thought the Gauls were like wiped. Yeah, I thought they were done.
No, that was just one army.
Yeah.
Gauls are a huge group of people, tons of tribes.
But there's such a huge.
They are so far. And so the Gauls, I bet I didn't even get a map. Sugar. The Gauls are very far up in northern Italy. When the Gauls come down, they are not expanding downwards, trying to expand their political influence the same way that, like, when Rome expands, Rome's trying to expand its influence. They view it as a territory to go raid. And so the Gauls come raiding down, take stuff, and go back up. They're more like the Vikings to the Romans. It's probably an okay analogy. And so that's how the Gauls are occasionally coming down. So it's been a while since they've seen the Gauls. It takes them a while to make their way down there, have other territories to raid. But they eventually make their way down, going to try invading Roman land, and get what plunder they can. So the Gauls are coming down. They know that the Gauls are coming down. On top of that, the siege of Velitrae is still in progress. So the Romans already have an army dedicated to continue the siege at Velitrae. With the Gauls coming down, last time the Romans faced the Gauls, what happened? Not nice. Rome got sacked. And so they're a bit terrified. And so the Romans appoint Camillus dictator for a 5th time.
Camillus.
Yes, for Camillus. Now, I don't know, probably creeping on 80 at this point. So the poor old man, he gets the army together. He goes, faces them somewhere north, and he's able to beat the Gauls in the field. So he wins the initial battle against the Gauls, and the Gauls go back to their camp. And the Gauls still haven't learned how to build a camp. And so they go and they attack the camp, and then it's an easy victory there. And the Gauls go scattering all over the place, and so they can't get a decisive victory against the Gauls because they're not retreating orderly anywhere. When they attack the camp, the Gauls just scatter everywhere. And so they don't really know how to pursue them. And so, in that sense, their lack of organization actually saves them from this massive defeat. So even though they were beaten, it's presented like not tons of Gauls were killed. It was, we easily took the camp and they quickly scattered once people started panicking. And over as quickly as it started. And they got the Gaul camp, so they got the plunder, so the Gauls are going to have to be done with their campaigning season.
Yeah, I just thought that the Gauls were done with the Romans. They're so far away.
Gauls aren't done with the Romans for a long time.
They just started.
Not all the way until you hear about a man by the name of Julius Caesar. And then the Gauls will be done with the Romans. Or the Romans will integrate the Gauls. Better way to say it. Okay. Now, the army was out fighting. The army comes back into the city. Not sure if they had a triumph. Think they celebrated triumph? Yes. And so the celebrations are going on while Camillus is still in office. Really quick, Licinius and Sextus, they just hurry up and get, as the army's coming back in the city, they rush it, get them gathered, get enough people that we can legally vote, and they hurry up and they vote on the laws before anyone can really know what's happening. They just do it super fast. And they're doing it all perfectly legally. Just sneakily. And so they hurry up, they do that, they get it together, and the law gets passed. And so now we're going to have consuls. And so they hurry up, and the same assembly that passes your laws votes on your consuls. And they hurry up and have elections for a consul. And 2 consuls get elected. And one of the consuls happens to be, Sextius. The very guy pushing forward with the law. And so by the time the patricians are figuring out what's going on here, the plebs are telling them, yep, the law got passed, we just passed the law, we just had our elections, and guess what? I'm now a consul. Yeah, surprise. And so the patricians, they're furious about this. They refuse to recognize the election as legitimate, even though it's technically legitimate. Now at the time, Camillus, still dictator, he hasn't even had time to step down from the dictatorship yet. It's happening so quick. And so...
They appointed the consuls while he was still a dictator.
Yes, they elected him. And so, consul, Camillus, he brings both parties together, figuring out what's going on here, finds out it's all perfectly legal, and tells the patricians kind of tough luck. But he helps them negotiate so that they'll all feel okay about it. And so what they end up agreeing to is the patricians will recognize that election and the laws being passed is legitimate, but in exchange, the plebs are going to agree to the creation of the office of praetor. Now, I accidentally thought that this was created forever ago, and then realized it wasn't. Now it exists. Remember that your praetors are essentially going to be your judges. So you remember how what's happened tons of times is you've needed an army at Rome and 2 armies outside of Rome. So the thought process behind the praetor is he will hold imperium, just like consuls hold imperium, but he's under the consuls. He will function largely as a judge at Rome, but he's also your backup guy in case that 3rd army back at the city's ever needed. He can lead it. So he's given imperium, he can lead armies. On top of that, he's going to function as your judge, and then you have your consuls are now your consuls. And on, sorry, what?
Is it kind of like saying, all right, fine, but there always will at least be one of our guys in a high position to
It's a high position. It's under the consuls, but it's now the second highest position in the state in a regular year, assuming no dictator or anything like that. So that position now has to still be exclusively patrician. And on top of that, they want to add 2 aediles and have those 2 aediles also be patricians. And so that's what's agreed to. Everyone coming to terms with the new political situation. So now there's praetors, which for the time being are going to be patrician only, and 2 aedile positions, which are also going to be patrician only. The plebs already have 2 aediles.
There's just one praetor or there's multiple?
It starts out just one, soon it's going to be multiple.
And there has to be a pleb.
So now one of your consuls has to be a plebeian.
Okay.
And so now with that reconciliation, Camillus, he's okay to step down as dictator. We won't be hearing him do anything again. Pretty old dude. And Levy give you a line. Thus, after their long estrangement, the 2 orders of the state were at length brought into harmony. And it's how the 6th book of his collection ends. So we're now done with the 6th book. Ready to start on the 7th book. Any questions on that before we move forward? Okay, so next year, we're now in the year where we've got 2 consuls, back to consuls, military tribunes, no longer think. It's going to be consuls here on out. 2 consuls. One of your consuls is a patrician, one of your consuls is Sextius, the pleb that helped push forward this law, that pleb that was a tribune of the plebs for 10 years. But not the son-in-law pleb. Okay, so remember that Gauls, they weren't really beaten, they were just kind of scattered. Well, they were beaten, but they weren't killed, they were just kind of scattered. And so rumors start spreading that Gauls are regrouping up north. And please tell me I have a map nearby. I need to insert those more. And the Hernici revolted against Rome way back when Rome got sacked. And they've been in rebellion against Rome kind of ever since. But they just haven't done anything about it. They've occasionally sent troops here and there to help in whatever fight, but they kind of just been sitting back watching to see what's going to happen. Now they're going to get more involved and actually start attacking the Romans. So of all the people that were enemies of Rome, these guys are the ones who haven't really played their hand yet. So, rumors that the Hernici are preparing for war against Rome, which isn't surprising since they revolted forever ago, and rumor that the Gauls are going to regroup and come back into the Roman territory. Now, even though this is going on, the Senate technically is the one that declares war against people. The Senate refuses to declare war against either of these guys. They don't want any troops levied. They don't want any army going out and fighting these guys. All because they're just being petty. They do not want, because when an army gets sent out, the consuls draw lots to essentially see who is going to be the one sent with a particular army. And they're afraid that that pleb consul will go and distinguish himself by doing something good. And they don't want any chance for him to win any glory to himself. They don't want this to be a good year for him. The first pleb consul, we got to forget about it. So, they're not going to let anything happen. Now, the tribune of the plebs, as they start thinking more and more about that deal that they made right after they had their big victory, and reflect on it, they like it less and less. They say, we traded 3 patrician positions for 1 plebeian position. Right? Because you got 2 aediles and a praetor created for the patricians, and in exchange, plebs got 1 of the consulships. So they feel cheated that way. Now, the Senate, they say, well, I guess you kind of have a point. And so they agree that the 2 new aediles that were supposed to be patrician only will actually be alternated between patricians and plebs. And so that balances out and everyone can feel better about it. The Senate, they got a sense of pride, and they don't want to feel like they're taking advantage. They felt ashamed that they forced that part in, I think is the way Livy said it. Yeah, lots of levies.
But it's kind of interesting how the plebs were able to set a bar, and the Senate really upset about that, but then eventually kind of realized this is the new normal, and that there is some type of imbalance of power, and actually are being reasonable, even though they feel like they were cheated in the first place.
That's the way he portrays it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so first year, pretty much peace. Nothing happens. No army sent out. The Hernici and the Gauls, whatever they're doing, don't end up attacking Rome. So first year goes by, and the first pleb consul doesn't get to go distinguish himself. Second year, pestilence breaks out. Huge plague. So 365. This is a massive plague. The way Livy portrays it, about 1 in every 5 to 1 out of every 10 people died from this plague. Huge plague. Massive hit on the population. The plague, I think, ends up lasting a total of 3 years. So pestilence breaks out. Many die in that first year, including Marcus Furius Camillus. So there he goes, 83, he's now dead. So first year, pestilence breaks out, and it's likely a region-wide thing. We don't hear about any armies coming in attacking at this time, so I think it's region-wide, just a guess. And the pestilence continues into the next year. What is this? Licinio-Sextian? We talked, oh, okay, now I remember. So it continues into the next year. So now the plebs, what are they thinking? The gods must be angry with us. We must somehow appease the gods. And so Licinio-Sextian, they already did this in the past before when there was a huge plague. This is the one where you set out the food for the gods, and you open your house, and everyone can come and have meals interchangeably, like your home's always open to everyone else. You let all the prisoners go, take all the chains off. No one's in chains at this time. We're all kind of equal, and big feast, almost like a celebration, but everyone's sick. But
exchanging food.
that's a ceremony they do. Unfortunately, even though they did all that, the plague shockingly still continued. And now, when you can't make the gods happy, when you don't know how to make the gods happy, and you're a Roman, who do you turn to?
Delphi.
Well, Delphi's one, but up north, they got their Etruscan friends. Remember, they look to the Etruscans to know religious matters. And Etruscans, they know things when it comes to the gods and being pious and how to appease the gods. And so the Etruscans, they had these things called plays. Now, scenic something, I can't remember exactly what Livy says, but basically what we mean by plays. And so for the first time, plays are being put on in Rome. And they start out as completely religious things. These aren't meant for entertainment. These are simply religious things. You watch people go through the actions of whatever the people go through the actions of, putting on a performance to appease the gods.
And they never had one before?
Never had one before. And this is when they're well, I don't know if they had one before, but now they're introduced into Rome, and they're going to be a thing in Rome from here on out.
That's shocking.
And then Livy goes on a huge tangent now about how the plays evolve in Rome and how they start out these nice, religious, pious things, and then the youth quickly take to the plays, and next thing you know, the youth are imitating these things, and they're creating their own plays, and they start corrupting the youth. And so Roman youth being ruined by all these plays, and a bunch of them deciding that they want to go imitate these play actors.
Tale as old as time.
Well, I'll give you a sense of where this goes. Fast forward, I don't know how far you have to fast forward, but it's going to be something like 100, 200 years. It's seen as very effeminate for a man to do something like that. And actually being an actor in a play, unless it's one of the special proper plays that are for religious purposes, it disqualifies you from military duty. You are not allowed to participate in the military if you're one of those boys who participates in plays. Very effeminate. We can't have those types of men in the army. And you might think, okay, get out of military service. Okay, I'll go be in a play. Remember, every political office starts with 10 years of military service. That's your first prerequisite for holding office in Rome. So if you do that, you basically disqualify yourself from political life. And political life for the Romans, it's everything. It's what everything rotates around. So, Livy goes on that tangent with the plays, but here's where they're introduced, trying to appease the gods. Shockingly, the play continues into the next year. And what's worse, the Tibur floods.
Not very happy about it.
Yeah. So the gods must be really angry now.
Obviously.
And so, they remembered, some of the old timers said, it's obvious what we need to do. There's a religious ceremony that Rome stopped doing like 60 years ago. There's a particular temple, I think it's the temple of Nerva. I feel like I'm saying an emperor's name, but I'm close.
Neptune.
It's got to be in it, it's got an N in it.
Very popular in the Roman.
I think. I could be way off. One of the gods, or goddess, and they're associated with numbers somehow. Well, it used to be the case that every year you would go on the back of the temple and put a knell in there. The highest ranking official in Rome would do this to mark the years. Maybe says it was because the practice started before we were writing symbols down to keep track of what the years were, and as symbols were adopted, people stopped doing this. So some of the old timers are saying, this used to be a thing back in my day we did to keep the gods happy. And you young whippersnappers haven't been doing it. So we need to appoint a dictator. If someone's going to put in the knell, we got to get the highest officer of state we can and have them be the one to put in the knell to mark off the year. And we got to bring back this practice, sticking in nails to mark off years. All the Romans say, what a brilliant idea. Let's definitely do that. And so they appoint a dictator. Lucius Manlius. He'll get his last name later for how he behaves, but they call him Imperiosus. Somehow being, thinking himself basically like a king. I think he had himself something like that. Can't remember exactly, but it's negative connotation.
Interesting.
But right now his name is Lucius.
Yeah.
Lucius Manlius.
Lucius Manlius is his name right now, related to the Manlian family. So they appoint him dictator for this great religious ceremony. This happens in 363 BC. And he goes as dictator and he puts the nail in. Says that was fun. Now that I'm dictator, what I'm going to do is I'm going to levy the troops, and I'm going to go and I'm going to fight the Hernici, and I'm not going to squander this opportunity, and I'm going to use this opportunity to win some glory for myself, make a name for myself, do the Roman thing. Everyone is shocked that he's doing this. The population is sick. He's known as an extremely harsh and brutal man. He tries carrying out the levy. People are somewhat kind of refusing the levy. He gets very abusive with anyone who won't refuse the levy, having them beaten, some of them jailed. It gets so out of hand, pretty much all the magistrates in the state turn against him, saying, you've got to step down. This is not what you were called to do. You were given, when you're sent as a dictator, you're given a particular task. Now, technically, the office is yours for 6 months, but every time you're appointed dictator, there's also a task involved that you're meant to accomplish. And so it's understood that once you finish putting in that nail, you step down. That's what was understood. And after a bunch of fighting, he finally gives way, making everyone hate him, and he finally steps down from being dictator. And so, following year, people are feeling better. Pestilence is finally gone. The nail must have done the trick. They don't like what Lucius Manlius did as dictator. They think he abused his power. He physically hurt a lot of people in the state, physically had them beaten. And so in the following year, one of the tribune of the plebs, not sure which one, didn't bother writing his name, he schedules a trial for Lucius Manlius. So he schedules the date to have him put on trial. He's got his trial date set. Now, he's being brought on trial for two things. One thing is what he did as dictator. The other thing that's kind of like a well-known secret is what he was doing with one of his sons, Titus Manlius. So he had a son, Titus Manlius, who, not the brightest bulb, not the sharpest tool in the shed, dumb kid, doesn't learn much. He's not eloquent in his speech. He tries to get him all the best speech coaches, all the things he can do. The kid, he's just a dumb kid. And the father, being frustrated with him, would have him physically beaten and stuff like that, and forced him to go do very brutal physical things over and over again. So he's largely accused of raising his son like a brute, forcing him to do all sorts of physical activity, treating him like he's an idiot. Livy says even if he's an idiot, I mean even the animals take care of their retarded young. Now the kid, he wasn't retarded, he was just not that bright. He's just a bit below average. He's not super stupid, he's just kind of stupid. He's kind of slow, I'm going to say, not stupid. He's a slow guy. Careful thinker. And so, they want to bring trial against him for how he's been treating his son Titus Manlius, along with what he did as dictator. Now, his son, Titus Manlius, he finds out that this trial is going to be brought against his father, and he knows the tribune of the plebs is going to bring it against him. And so he arranges a meeting with this tribune of the plebs to go talk to him. And the tribune of the plebs assumes he's going to tell me all the details about what his father had done, so I can bring this case against him the right way. And so Titus Manlius, he says, yeah, need to talk to you in private. Don't want this to be a public thing. The tribune of the plebs agrees to meet with him in private. When he meets with him in private, Titus Manlius, he pulls out a knife on him, and he says, you're going to swear to me right now that you're not going to bring this trial against my father for the way he's treated me, or I'm going to kill you. Well, hard to say no. And so he says, okay, I promise not to bring trial against your father. And word gets out that Titus Manlius did this. And while everyone thinks that trial should be brought against Lucius Manlius, everyone is praising Titus for this behavior. They say, what a wonderful son. He won't turn on his father regardless of how his father has abused him. What a perfect son.
Such a good guy.
Now, careful. He's a careful thinker. Now, military tribunes, we've kind of been using this word. I've been lazy every time I talked about a military tribune up till now. So when we were talking about military tribunes that replace consuls, they're actually called military tribunes with consular powers. That's their name. I didn't want to say that every time. I didn't want to write that every time. So I just called them military tribunes. There's also a position in the military called a military tribune. And so that's the distinction. The first military tribunes go all the way back to Rome, back when Rome just had 3 tribes under the king. Remember, each of the 3 tribes, when it came to war, was responsible for contributing 1,000 troops each. Each of those 1,000 troops came under their tribal leader, or their military tribune. And then those 3 came under the king. And so the military tribune has always been a position in the Roman military. Up until now, the way it worked is that the head of the military, there's a position above him, basically a general. I think they call it a legate at this time. But there's technically a position above them in the military, and that position used to select who the military tribunes were going to be. So it used to be by appointment. Now, for the first time, it's going to be an elected position. And so this position is going to evolve and become more of a political position. Remember that you have to serve 10 years in the military before you can hold an office in politics. This military tribune position is going to evolve into the position that a patrician gets his son into in the military. It's more of a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a stepping stone?
It's a stepping stone, but inside the actual military. It's not a fighting role, and it's not really a leadership role. It's like a camp officer type role. And you're going to be responsible for more of the logistics behind the fighting and stuff like that. That's what it's going to evolve into. Right now, it's more just like a straightforward lieutenant. You're the head of a bunch of centurions. But that's how it's going to evolve over the years. Anyways, so there's military tribune is now a position that people run for that position and get elected to that position. And so, Titus Manlius, he's so praised by everyone, he actually won an election as a military tribune in the first year that they ever did it. And he was the second one elected. So they elect 6. He got the second most votes out of all the people that got their votes. So, making a name for himself in Rome. Same year, a chasm opened up in the forum of Rome. Big hole. Now, I checked. Rome is on the fault line. So, could have been an earthquake. I don't know what it was. But chasm opened up in the forum on Rome. Now, obviously, this must be a sign we've got to do something. So the Romans, they consult their local Etruscans, and their local Etruscans tell them that Rome must sacrifice her greatest strength into the chasm. That's what the gods are demanding of you. And so people are having the conversation, what is Rome's greatest strength? What are we required to throw in here? don't want to throw anything too precious. Well, Marcus Curtius, he was a young Roman, made a name for himself as a great warrior, very brave. He says the answer is obvious. What is Rome's greatest strength? It's the valor of her sons. And so he puts on all his armor, he gets on his horse, and he charges into the chasm, sacrificing himself.
Oh boy.
The Romans say that must have done it. They fill in the chasm, and life goes on.
Okay.
All right? God's appeased.
Wasn't the conversation about electing plebs to a holy position ever brought up as a possible explanation?
Very reasonable interpretation. And it's definitely what Appius Claudius was saying at the time. It's obvious why we've been having these plagues. The gods are angry about the plebeian consul. It's obvious why the chasm opened up. The gods are angry about our plebeian consul. It's obvious why the Tibur River flooded. The gods are angry about our plebeian consul. And so, next year, or maybe the same year, not sure, 362 BC, an envoy is sent to Hernici. Remember Hernici this whole time, technically they've been a rebellion. They've kind of helped out a little bit, but it's been this long brewing eventual war that's coming to head with the Hernici. Rome would like to just put an end to this war before it even starts if they can. So they send some envoys up to Hernici that basically says, look, you contributed in this conflict, that one, pay us restitutions for that, and we'll consider ourselves square. The Hernici laugh and say, not a chance. So, no chance of avoiding war. And so the assembly, they decide to vote to go to war. And by lot, once again now, the war is assigned to Lucius Genucius, I'm not sure. I'm assuming that's not a but he's a pleb consul. And so for the first time, a plebeian consul is now leading an army. And actually exercising their imperium. So, Genucius, he's the one leading the army, and he ends up getting his army caught in an ambush. Don't know the details on how he got sucked into that ambush, but leading his army, they get caught in an ambush by the Hernici. The army is able to kind of quickly get away, but he himself and some of the men he was with end up getting caught in the ambush and actually get killed. So they march up in the Hernici territory. On their way marching up, probably had some bad information about where the Hernici army was, get ambushed, their leader gets killed, and the rest of the Romans quickly go back to their camp. And so now the next highest officer is going to take control over the army, and they're going to try and hold out against the Hernici. The Hernici know that they've just killed the general of the army, essentially, and so they're going to try and push their advantage, quickly taking the Roman camp. So he dies. The Romans, they're now holed up in their camp, hanging on for as long as they can, expecting aid to come to them. I think they took a significant amount of losses in the ambush, if I remember right. Anyways, when word gets back to Rome, the patricians, they celebrate this loss. And they mock the plebs, saying things like, you can force the patricians to accept the pleb consul, but you can't force the gods. And this is the final nail in the coffin for you guys. All the things that have been going on before were because the gods were angry about this plebeian consul, and now they finally killed one to show their anger at you. And since Appius Claudius was the one pushing this appointment, or was the one pushing this position, the longest one, and Appius Claudius going all the way back when he gave his speech, he said, if you allow this law to go forward and a pleb to become a consul, it will anger the gods. It's more and more starting to look like Appius Claudius kind of knew something that the rest of us didn't. And so they have him appointed dictators. And so he levies more troops now, knowing that the Hernici are up there attacking the Roman camp. And he runs up there to try and save his fellow Romans in the Roman camp. Sulpicius here, so he was the next highest Roman officer in the army that got ambushed. So he's the one heading up the Roman camp, waiting for Appius Claudius to come with reinforcements. So when he got the soldiers back to the camp and fortified the camp, the Hernici quickly came and attacked the camp, thinking that they were going to get an easy victory. he decided to launch a counterattack against them and to actually fight him off. And so by the time Appius Claudius gets up there, the Hernici have actually scattered, and they've been pushed back by the remaining Romans. Now, the Hernici find out that Appius Claudius has showed up with the second army, and so now they know that Rome has pretty much mobilized all the troops that they have up into Hernici territory. And so the Hernici, they think this is finally their time to strike. They need to gather all the strength that they have, and they need to throw it against the Romans. So the Romans, down here in Hernici territory somewhere, not sure exactly where, but the Hernici now are all going to organize together, everyone sending all the military might that they have to go fight the Romans. On top of that, they make 8 special cohorts of 400 men each of their most elite troops. This is the Hernici. These men are not required to do any tasks. They're not going to haul around their own camp food. They're not going to haul around their own food, their own camp materials, none of that. They will do no activities of burden. They will save themselves strictly for fighting. There are elite troops. They won't do any of the regular chores that are typically required, and we're also going to pay them double pay. And we're going to rely on them, together with all the Hernici that we have, to fight the Romans. And so they go, the Hernici, they gather everyone up, the Romans gather everyone up, and so they're all going to fight in the field, all together. So there's all your Romans out in the field, and what ends up happening is right in the middle of the Hernici line is where they put all their elite troops. And they fought it so that there's a hill going on right in the center here. This is a hill. And so everyone down the line can kind of see up as to how the fighting is going with your elites. So the Hernici, their whole plan is make sure everyone can see these guys. We've reserved their strength as much as we can. We put our best of the best there. As long as those guys are holding out, that will give courage to everyone else there holding out. And our line will hold as long as these guys hold. And these guys aren't going to give up. They're our best. So that's their big plan. The Romans, they don't really have a big plan. Now they're fighting somewhere where, whatever reason, the cavalry aren't really involved in the fighting. So the cavalry are wherever the cavalry are. And they're probably going, attacking places, and running back, but not too involved. It gets to the point where these elite troops fighting the Romans are eventually starting to break through the Roman center. The cavalry, seeing what's going on, have to dismount, and they're the ones who now go up and take on the fight with the elite troops. Now remember who your cavalry are. These are your patricians. These are your elite members of society who are now going to go and fight where the fighting is the toughest. And so they go, they take over the fight over here, relieving the soldiers that are fighting there. And so now you have the cavalry, the Roman cavalry, fighting on foot against the Hernici elites. And this is a terribly fought battle. Goes on for an extended period of time. Huge casualties on both sides. But finally, after an extended period, the Romans finally win the battle. These guys give up. Once these guys give up, the Hernici altogether give up. Because everyone could see what was going on right there on the hill. Cavalry. Okay, Rome finally wins. Okay, so the Hernici, they took their losses. At the end of the day, it was all throughout the day that they were fighting. So once they went back, there wasn't the time to go and pursue them the way that you would normally pursue it. The fighting took all day. Although they did take some losses in the pursuit, or in the retreat, just not as much as they normally would. They go back to their camp. Well, the next day, the Hernici camp is completely empty, and all that's left there are the wounded Hernici that they left behind, the ones who wouldn't be able to escape anyways. And so the Hernici camp is found empty. They're able to at least plunder the camp and take that with them. Both sides took incredibly heavy losses because of how much the fighting went on. In particular, the fighting was fiercest where these guys were fighting. And so 1/4 of the Roman army was lost, and this would have been basically 2 Roman armies together. So 1/4 of all that population lost. And on top of that, a significant portion of that was all cavalry, all patricians, who took the brunt of the fighting. So it's a win for Rome, but it's kind of a Pyrrhic win. They're not too happy about it, especially after all the disease. So all the disease, and now even though they won, huge losses in their winning. And they also did when they were fighting against the Volsci and the Latins together.
I assume this plague was widespread. Everyone struggled.
I assume it was throughout the region because they weren't attacking during the plague. And maybe they knew Rome had the plague and they were just avoiding them. I don't know.
Avoid them like the plague.
Avoid them like the plague. Could have very much been the case. So, following year, Romans, still furious at the Hernici, in particular, because so many patricians were lost, the Senate, the one who decides where the armies are going and what they're going to be doing, they want their revenge on the Hernici. So they send an army up straight into the Hernici territory looking for a fight. They go out there, try to get the Hernici come out into a pitched battle. The Hernici refuse to give a battle. And so they go plundering around the area, can't get the Hernici to come out and fight them. They end up taking Antium there by storm and just taking that city from the Hernici. Because the Hernici aren't coming out to fight them, and so at least get something out of them. And so that is one of the Hernici's major cities. So good win for Rome there. Hernici will have also taken a bunch of losses, so maybe they just can't afford to fight them the way that they want to. No, did that. Move on to this one. Okay, so that was up in Hernici. Antium, that is that Hernici city. I showed you that gets captured. Now, while the Romans are marching back home, so Antium is right here. That's the city that they just took. Rome, over here. They got to march back home. They didn't get a military camp, and so to resupply themselves, as they're coming up, I guess their path, for whatever reason, came up this way. I'm not sure if there's roads or something that made that easier. But they end up coming up past the city of Tibur here. Tibur. As they're passing the city of Tibur, they're expecting to get resupplied. That's one of their ally cities. And the city of Tibur, I'm not sure what to call them. I don't want to say Tibur because we call that the Tibur River. So I'm going to call it Tibur. The city of Tibur here closes their gates to the Romans, refusing to allow them to resupply. And that's one of their Roman allies. That's one of your jobs. That's as clear cut as saying, we're now at war with you. Now, we didn't talk about any of it, but Tibur here had been giving the Romans problems for a long time in smaller ways, just pushing boundaries, getting away with whatever insults they can get away with. And so this was the final straw, and so Rome recognizes that they are now at war with Tibur, as they are going back to Rome. Okay. So they end up declaring war against Tibur, but they have a different problem, and their next problem is the Gauls are back. So the Gauls, they come from up north, and they encamp. So Rome has their major road, which comes over here across the Anio past Fidene. It's a major trading road. The place the Gauls encamp themselves, the bridge that goes over the Anio right there, they just encamp themselves on the other side of the bridge. Good place to get plunder because that's where a bunch of your trade is coming past. Along this river, and along this road. So, Gauls encamp just on the other side of the Anio River, just on the other side of a bridge there. The Romans, even though they're at war with Tibur here, they can't send any troops over there. They need to come help up here. Turns out, Tibur actually has an alliance with the Gauls and is actually supplying the Gauls with supplies. So even though the Gauls are so far away from home and they don't really walk around with much, they don't have to worry too much about it because they have a local ally in the region who's the one supplying them. And then they'll also plunder whatever they can get from where they're located. So, the Via Salaria, that's the name of the road that the Gauls are encamped on, that major road that goes up over the Anio past Fidene. That trade route. North of the Anio, aided by Tibur here. Okay. So, with the Gauls suddenly invading, they're already at war with Tibur. The Hernici, who knows what's going to happen there? They just took a city, so maybe they're good. But the Gauls coming down, the Romans decide once again that they're going to appoint a dictator. And they're already tight for men. And so when they levy those troops, they're including men who typically would have been too young to be included in the levy. They kind of have to stretch to get enough of an army to go up and fight them. They really don't want to take on this fight, but gotta do what you gotta do. And so, you've got the Anio River. Well, we'll draw the bridge first. There's the bridge. Here's the Anio River. The Romans are making their camp on this side, and the Gauls are making their camp on this side. Pretty good to be on that side of a river, on that side of a bridge, because if you send your troops across a bridge, as they come across, you can just annihilate them. So, very good place to hold up defenses is on the other side of a bridge. You do not want to be the army crossing a bridge in a fight. That's a good way to lose a fight. It's even stupider than trying to fight uphill. So, no one really wants to be the one to march across the bridge. They want to establish control of the bridge before they fight across the bridge. And so there's small skirmishes going on back and forth, trying to somehow get some control over the bridge so that you could get your army across without being frustrated by the other guys. Those skirmishes are going nowhere. What ends up happening is some big tough Gaul, he ends up coming down on the bridge, and he challenges the Romans to single combat. Says, basically, let you and one of me and one of you be the one to settle this. We have his quote captured here. Let the bravest man that Rome now possesses come forward here to battle. That the event of an engagement between us both may show which nation is superior in war. Now remember, as a Roman, you don't want to fight a Gaul in single combat. If you got 1,000 Romans versus 1,000 Gauls, put your money on the Romans. If you've got 10 Gauls versus 10 Romans, put your money on the Gauls. You don't want to fight these guys in single combat. They're not as organized as the Romans, but in single combat, they're bigger, stronger. They dedicate more of their lives to fighting this way. And on top of that, even though the Gauls are largely poor compared to the Romans, the elite amongst the Gauls are going to be better armed than the elites amongst the Romans. The Gauls are good with metal, in particular iron. So their Gauls probably got something like chainmail on.
You could call him Goliath.
Yeah,
You could if you want to. Okay. And so some poor Roman has to be the guy to come face him. The Romans listening to him, making his insults, they're all embarrassed sitting here listening to it. I mean, you're supposed to be a Roman soldier, and this guy's telling you, and you really don't want to be the one that has to go fight this guy. Because even worse than having to go fight him is, what if you're the one that loses?
Yeah.
Think about the shame you bring to your family, not to mention death. And so, you probably want someone who's a bit slower to be the guy to take this guy on. Maybe someone like Titus Manlius. He can't stand the insult.
Yeah.
And so he asked the dictator if he could be the one to go put this guy in his place, and the dictator is okay with that. And so Titus Manlius, he's the one who decides to go and fight him. Now, Livy gives all sorts of details to the fighting. You almost feel like you're reading Homer. But essentially, Manlius decides to use a short weapon and basically avoid the first couple plunges, get in close to the Gaul, who's a lot bigger than him, taller, more gangly, whatever, and then up close does the killing. And so he's able to kill the big Gaul. He kills the big Gaul, and he goes, and from the Gaul, even though the Gaul has all this great stuff on him, he only takes a golden chain around his neck. Now somehow, Torquatus is somehow, through the etymology, related to golden chain or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is. There's something like a torca being a necklace or something. I don't know.
So that's his name now.
But that's his name now. The same way that his ancestor was Capitolinus, he is now Torquatus. And his ancestors will now be blah, 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 Torquatus. And that will become a name. You are a descendant from this Titus Manlius. So, he goes, gets his golden chain as his reward for killing the biggest, maddest Gaul. On top of that, when he comes back, the Roman camp, they're all cheering, they're all celebrating. The dictator awards him with a small golden crown. Can't remember what these things are called, but you essentially get these as a prize if you are considered to have done an action that saved an army. And so it's a very big honor when you get one of these little crowns, and so he got one of those little crowns. So, huge honor for him. Now, that was the end of the day. The next day, the Gauls, they're gone.
Kept their word?
I don't know that there was any promise made that if you beat our guy, we'll leave. But remember how much of these early battles are just the morale of the troops. You just watch your biggest, baddest dude get killed. You do not want your army fighting the next day. These guys are eager for the fight. They're all hyped up. These guys, not so much. So the Gauls, they abandon their camp. What they decide to do, so they were in camp somewhere over here where the bridge is. They abandon their camp, leaving all their supplies. So the Romans get that, yay. But they just go and they resupply at Tibur here. And so now it's like they didn't even lose their camp. I'm not sure what they had to pay. They probably had some gold from how they came down through the area. I don't know. And then they go on their merry way. Not sure exactly the path they took. But down to Campania, somewhere down here. It's known as a very wealthy region in Rome. Some of the best farmland is down that area. So they decide, let's go up to that region and get some easier plunder.
The Gauls?
The Gauls.
Have they just ran out of stuff to plunder up north?
I don't know.
That's so far away.
Maybe they made
Yeah, they
treaties
have
with some of the
all the
people
way
up
back.
north. Maybe they just like collected tribute from people up north, and the people down south aren't paying tribute, so.
So the Etruscans are just so occupied. No wonder we don't have to hear anything about it.
Yeah, I do not know what is going on in northern Etruria right now. But they could be fighting the Gauls. So let's see. Titus Manlius, we got his golden chain. He gets Torquatus. Dictator rewards him. Gauls abandon their camp. Resupplied at Tibur. Move on to Campania. And that's it. Okay. On to. Maybe not. Maybe we'll call it their next series of wars.
Nice.
Good place to end it so far. Okay. So, we'll call it there. Rome back reasserting herself, dealing with some enemies. Big move. Plebeian-wise, plebs are in a much, much better spot now than they were when we started the lecture. So the debt problem has now been dealt with. We're now going to have every single year at least one magistrate being a pleb consul. And I don't know if we'll ever get 2 pleb consuls. I imagine it's going to happen at some time. I don't know the history that well. But any questions you want recorded? Yeah, you don't have to know the history that well to teach it, turns out.
Crazy.
All right, okay, if no more questions you want recorded, see you guys next time.